Welcome to the Homeschool Show from North Carolinians for Home Education. I'm Amanda Wayers, your host, and today I have a very special guest, Amy Sloan from Humility and Doxology. I'm so excited. So hi, Amy.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited.
Yes, I'm thrilled. So let's get started and just have you introduce yourself, because I have a terrible memory, but I don't think we've ever actually met in person. Have we? No.
I don't think so. No.
I don't think so either. Okay, so tell me and the rest of our audience about yourself, just maybe like personally and your homeschool experience, and then a little bit about humility and doxology or whatever you want to tell us.
Yeah, well, like we already said, my name is Amy Sloan. I'm actually a second generation North Carolina homeschooler. So I was homeschooled all the way through high school graduation here in North Carolina. And now I'm homeschooling my own children. I have 5. I'm currently only homeschooling 4 because our oldest graduated from our homeschool a couple years ago. And then our next oldest will be graduating, Lord willing, this spring. And then we also have a 9th grader, 7th grader, and 4th grader. So kind of lots of different ages everywhere from elementary up through college life right now. My husband also was actually homeschooled through 7th grade, but in Virginia. Not quite as great as North Carolina, but it's up there. And so we actually always knew we wanted to homeschool. It was never really a big, actually even discussion or decision we made. We had both had a really positive experience being homeschooled. And it was just one of those things before we were married. We're like, I kind of want to homeschool my kids. Oh yeah, I do too. Okay, great. It was just very easy decision for us. And it is definitely the best hard thing that I've done, but it's been worth the challenges as well. So I write at humilityanddoxology.com and host the Homeschool Conversations with Humility and Doxology podcast. So that's kind of what I do online, but most of the work is with homeschooling and parenting and mothering and wifing and all the rest.
That's awesome. So I so understand. Now, where did humility and doxology come from? What is the kind of the source of that name? Because I think it's so interesting.
So it's really kind of funny. For years, people had been telling me, oh, you should start a blog. I want to hear about your experience being homeschooled and as you homeschool your kids. And I was like, I am not going to do that. In fact, I wrote a couple articles for the greenhouse for NCHE before I even started my own website. But one night, kind of randomly, I decided to go ahead and just start my own website. And it was very easy to pick the title because for years, those were the 2 words I had used to describe the purpose of education to my own children. I told them that my goal as their mom, as their home educator, was with all that we were learning, I wanted them to grow in humility, a lower view of themselves, and in doxology, praise of God. And I really still to this day think those 2 words kind of summarize our life as Christians and especially our role as educators. That I want to not build up people who are puffed up because they know a whole lot, but people who are filled with wonder as they look around at the world God has made, what he has done in history and now, and ultimately who are moved towards praise and love of God, to worship, humility and doxology. Sometimes I also say like wonder and worship. I really do feel like that kind of summarizes the goal of education. And so that's where the name of my site came from.
I love that. That's so beautiful. How neat. So I know you were homeschooled, so did you know about NCHE growing up? How did you first hear about NCHE as an organization?
Yeah, so my parents were members of NCHE back in the day. I don't actually know what year they first joined. I was homeschooled in North Carolina from when I was like 5 to 10, and then from when I was 14 to high school graduation.
Okay.
So I'm not sure exactly in there where they joined NCHE, but I can't remember a time not knowing about it. My family, we would go every year to, or most years, to the NCHE conference and convention. I have so many fond memories of that. Unfortunately, it's my husband's birthday weekend, so I haven't gotten to go in as an adult, but I really have so many fond memories of going as a child. So yeah, I've known about NCHE as long as I can remember. And so as soon as my oldest was, school age, we decided to go ahead and join NCHE ourselves.
That's so awesome. And then I know that you have written a lot for the greenhouse. So you said you've been doing that for years, right?
Yes, I have. I always enjoyed reading that magazine back even before when it was just a newsletter. Now, of course, it's also available online. So it's been really fun as like a second generation NCHE member. It feels really special to get to contribute to that. Just the encouragement I know it provides for North Carolina homeschoolers, especially those who maybe don't have local community. So that's been really special to me. And then, of course, a couple years ago to get to submit my son's graduation photo in the graduate issue and be like, I remember when my picture was in here. It was just really special.
It really is. It's like full circle moment. I love that. That's so cool. So as a homeschool mom, and I think it's even cooler that you're a second generation homeschooler, what is your favorite part about homeschooling and maybe your least favorite part?
Well, the favorite parts would be hard to pick just one, right? I love that I can personalize the education for my children. I love that everything we learn, we are able to relate it to who God is and what he has done. And that just can be part of the breadth of our education. I love being able to share inside jokes with my kids and just have a really unique family culture shared around in our family. A lot of nerdy things like Shakespeare and funny memes about science and whatnot. But I think one of the things I just love the most is I do love the relationship time I have with my children, just all of the time I have that I wouldn't have with them otherwise, especially with an age range. I mean, I know there are families with larger age ranges than mine, but with 10 years, there's a lot that the older kids just would not know about their younger siblings. And so to have all that time together across the ages, across the grades, that is priceless. And I am so incredibly thankful for that. So that would be like a favorite thing. And at the same time, that might also be a least favorite thing because it is hard. It is hard to always be with each other, to really get to see, well, I was going to say I get to see the nastiest parts of my children, but actually it's more like they get to see the nastiest parts of me all the time, right? And that's hard. A friend of mine, Lena Sutherland, says that homeschooling is like parenting on steroids. So parenting is already really hard. And with homeschooling, you're always parenting all the time, right? So I think that's a challenge, but I think it's definitely worth it. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I love that. My kids, I have a 12-year span from the oldest to the youngest. And I have definitely seen that, especially as 3 of mine are graduated and are adults now. But the relationship that they have and the intentionality that they have of just maintaining that relationship with their little brother is so sweet to me. And I know that would not be that way without homeschooling, because they would not have grown up together in that way, in the same way. So I love that. And oh yes, the always being together can be a challenge sometimes. Yes, sometimes. All right. So we like to sometimes on this show talk about what have we seen on the internet lately. It's like the internet is a wild and woolly place, and there's all kinds of things, especially in the homeschool world. There's a lot of different conversations going on. So I would love to ask you, what have you seen on the internet lately?
Yeah, so wow, a lot of crazy things
Uh-huh,
I
uh-huh.
don't want to talk about,
No, definitely not. Definitely
but
not.
don't we all? Sometimes you just want to say, like, you know what, internet, I will see you later. We're going to take a
Yeah,
break.
yes.
But I think there was an interesting question I saw posed recently. Um, and that was related to it was a mom who's like looking forward to homeschooling high school for the first
Mhm.
time. And she was asking about how to pick a curriculum that colleges would look on favorably, like a specific curriculum, so not course of study. And I thought that was a really interesting question
Mhm.
because I do think as a second generation homeschooler, I never was inside the box, you know?
Mm,
So it's
mhm,
easier for me to think
mhm.
now still outside the box. But I think there still can be a lot of assumptions made about homeschooling high school. And so I thought that would be kind of interesting to discuss.
Yes, for sure. So, okay. So I have graduated three, like I said, and all three have gone to college in some form or fashion. So only one of them has graduated. The other two, it was not really for them once they got there, but they all have gotten into college. And I would say that the curriculum that we chose was not necessarily chosen with college in mind. I think I just had an idea of what I wanted high school to look like for the kids, and I sort of made their transcript and whatever work for me, and made their curriculum plan, like what we wanted to do, and then sort of finagled the transcript a little bit. If there was something out of the box, then I would maybe come up with some creative ways to list it and on the transcript, that it wouldn't sound so strange to an admissions counselor or whatever. So I think it's a great opportunity still in high school to continue to customize your kids' education. I know when my oldest daughter was approaching high school, I had that freak out moment. Like, oh no, it's high school. Oh, we got to change everything. But now, a few kids down the line, I always tell people it's not really different. The main difference is record keeping. And that's really it. Your philosophy of education still stands. How you want to approach homeschooling still stands. You're still discipling your children, all of that. So I think I've gotten a better perspective maybe on that over the years, but we just continued on with kind of the same kind of curriculum, the same educational philosophy that we had already had. And then I just sort of put it on the transcript how I wanted it to look. So, how about you?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think it's really interesting because I think for most of us, we chose homeschooling because we saw something that we didn't quite that we didn't want to conform to this sort of, inside the box mentality, the way things, are always done. And then, like you were saying, suddenly a lot of times parents get to high school and throw out all of those educational ideals, all of that outside the box thinking, and are like, okay, give me the things to check off, and I've got to make sure I do this right. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important. I loved hearing how you thought about the people in your homeschool first. Like that didn't change just because now they were in high school. One of the questions I recommend people asking when they're planning their homeschool year before you buy curriculum or any of those things is, what kind of human being do I want to raise? Like when you think big picture about the adult that you want to leave your home, what are the things that really matter to you there? And some of that's going to be academic and some of it is not, but that doesn't change just because they're in high school. And so, as we plan for children who can grow in wisdom and humility and ability to listen to those who are different and also to speak the truth in love, to
Mm-hmm.
understand how to write well and do some math and understand these principles, right? Those are things that can really play out differently for different children. And then, like you said, you follow something kind of creative and unique, and then you just call it something that makes sense to a college admissions officer. Which it's telling the truth. You really did do an English course, but instead of calling it something really quirky and creative, just call it English 1 or American literature, whatever, fits what you studied.
Yep.
I recently interviewed Pam Barnhill on my podcast. We were really talking about high school, and she talked about how a transcript is just a communication tool. Like if you went to a different country and you tried to speak to someone, you're in Germany and you try to speak to them in Japanese, like that doesn't make sense. They're not going to understand what you're saying. And like with a transcript, it's basically the same thing. You're just communicating what you mean in a language they understand. And I thought that was a really helpful kind of way of thinking about it.
Yes, that is so smart. I love that. I might steal that for the future. Love it. That's so good. Well, I really do encourage people. I get so many questions and I see so many out on the internet about that exact thing. It's high school. What do we do now? How do we pick accredited curriculum or whatever it is? That's always kind of a watchword. And so I love the wisdom to just breathe, look at the people. I love that. That's so smart. So good.
If I can just say one more like practical matter here too, a lot of colleges and universities now have admissions pages you can see online. You don't even have to talk to a real admissions officer anymore. And a lot of schools now have special pages directed for homeschool applicants. Yeah. So it's really easy, before you start homeschooling high school or in those first few years, just get a few examples from some schools you think your child might be interested in. I always looked at one local state school, a private school, and then like a third option. So I kind of got different perspectives of what different schools were looking for. And that can just really calm your fears too, I think, about what they're expecting or looking for. But that can be a way to kind of make sure you're planning and hitting the markers for your unique child and where they might end up. And I also want to say now with 2 teens who have been accepted into college, getting into college is really not as hard as you think. There are so many colleges out there that can meet the needs of so many different students. And frankly, they are businesses and they want your money. So getting into college is really not that hard, I promise. Paying for it, now that's a whole nother thing.
That's so true. It's so true. Oh, all right. So every week I like to do something called Homeschool Helps with Amanda. So my role on the NCHE board is Homeschool Helps Director. And as Homeschool Helps, I literally help people homeschool. And usually I like to focus on people that are homeschooling in particular circumstances. So a few weeks ago, Melanie Willis and I did a special episode on crisis homeschooling. And we were moved to do that first because of just the devastation in Western North Carolina after Hurricane Helene, but also because we know that so many homeschool families are facing crises of varying types and degrees. And I know I've been through some things and I know you have as well. So my Homeschool Helps today, I would like to talk about how do you approach homeschooling when you're dealing with a crisis in your house, especially maybe a medical type crisis. What do you do? Tell us about your experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So a little over a year ago now, my youngest son, he was 8 years old at the time, he was diagnosed with leukemia. And a cancer diagnosis, of course, throws a whole family into shock and then chaos as you're adding in dozens of appointments, innumerable overnight hospitalizations, including over Christmas last year. And then even when you're home, you're dealing with side effects and exhaustion, not just physical exhaustion for the patient, but emotional and physical exhaustion for the whole family. So last year, at the time of Isaac's initial diagnosis, he was in third grade, and then we were homeschooling. Let's see, it's hard enough to remember as is, but this was last year. Sixth grader, eighth grader, 11th grader, and then it was my son's first year at university, but he was living at home at the time.
Okay.
So there were a lot of things that were obviously very hard about that year, but it made me very thankful for homeschooling. I think one of the things that I did that I'm really thankful I did, and I would recommend if someone has some sort of sudden medical crisis or some, any unexpected crisis, honestly, is I went ahead and decided initially, proactively, which things I was going to remove from our plan. We were just like a few weeks into the homeschool year. It was going to be this great year. Amazing things were planned, right? It was going to be awesome. And I just looked at that and I knew I could spend the next year feeling constantly discouraged and behind because I wasn't doing those amazing things. Or I could make a choice as to what were the things that were most important that I was going to prioritize through the year and what were the things I was just going to say no to. So I actually cut out a couple entire subjects, including one that's actually really important to me and my family, a couple entire subjects that we laid aside for the year. And we focused in on a few things that we could do faithfully and well through the year. Even with my son, who obviously it was a much harder year for him than everyone else. But I knew if I could just do a little bit of math, read something with his eyes, and that was going to be something that I could do even if we were in the hospital. And so I think that was something that I did that I would really encourage families to do. Just making the choice on purpose felt in a time when so much felt out of my control. It helped me feel like I was still in control of my homeschool a little bit instead of feeling behind. And it made sure that the things that really did matter to me, that morning time, that read aloud time, the scripture and poetry memory time that we do all together, reading, math, like there were a few things that were like, okay, if we can get to those things, then I can feel like we've had a good day, even if everything else around us seems to be falling apart.
Wow. I think that's so wise and wonderful and so hard at the same time. And yeah, how is Isaac doing now?
He's doing well. We still have over a year left of chemo treatment. So we are still in the midst of things, but this particular phase of treatment is less intense. And so we have whole days where he's full of energy and we get to all of our subjects. And then days like today where the nausea and the exhaustion come back and we kind of go back down. And all right, today we're just going to do this small handful of things. We're going to do them faithfully, and then we're going to say that's good enough. So I would say it's much easier and better this year. Although sometimes it's still hard because we'll have that sudden unexpected day as opposed to last year where I just knew every day was going to be hard.
Sure. So it sounds like you're saying maybe this year you had more of a normal plan, normal schedule, but you're holding it loosely.
Especially, I would say so. Especially for him, there's just a lot more flexibility. Some of the older kids, last year it was really important. They were in crisis too. It was really hard, especially that first semester. It was very hard when your parents are in the hospital for long stretches of time. At one point, like almost a month in the hospital for Isaac, like that's hard on even the kids who aren't like sick, actively sick. So we really just prioritized relationship time with them, that sort of emotional stability with them. And this year, not that I'm not still caring about relationships or emotions, but it's a little bit more like, okay, we had that year. That was a good year. That was what we needed last year. This year, let's kind of build back up that stamina, let's remember Sloan family standards. Yeah. Let's get back to a little bit more normal, but all with open hands, depending on the day, and continuing to prioritize, that we all love each other at the end of the day.
Exactly. I think that's so important. And one of the beauties of homeschooling, right, that I feel like when I look at that situation, just imagine the stress. It would be like stress on top of stress to have to maintain some kind of brick and mortar school schedule and curriculum and all that. So what a beautiful example of how homeschooling can really fit whatever situation you're in, and you can make it work for whatever situation you're in. I love that. I know about 7 or 8 years ago, my third had a really pretty severe mental health crisis. And for our family, it was very similar, even though it wasn't cancer or chronic illness or anything, but she did spend some time in a hospital. And it really was, it was a crisis for our whole family. And it was a crisis for her, obviously, but we kind of had to do the same thing, like step back of, okay, what are our priorities? What are we hanging on to in this moment when we cannot physically or mentally, emotionally, none of that. We can't do all the things. So what do we hang on to? What's important? What's our priority? And how do we, focus on health and, doing what we need to do to be as healthy as possible, all of us as a family, and still maintain some kind of normalcy. Because when everything is out of control, having that some kind of normalcy to hang on to, I think helped everyone have a little more peace.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that's where it's so nice that the flexibility we have with homeschooling. I can't tell, you or anyone listening, like what priorities would matter for their family or what would most make their family feel normal and connected, because that's going to be specific to your unique family, right? And so I think that's such a gift that we have homeschooling, that it doesn't have to look just like even any other homeschooler, let alone like a public school or a traditional school. Like, we get to figure out what's going to work best for our families.
I love that. So beautiful. And I will, and we at NCHE will keep Isaac on our prayer list for sure. And can't wait to hear about his complete and total healing. I love that. So the last part of our show, we always like to focus a little bit on what is going on in the world of NCHE. And right now, when this episode airs, it is going to be near Thanksgiving. So a few things are up and available. Always check out field trips. There's always field trips going on. A lot of fun things coming up. I've talked about the Charlotte Hornets basketball game that we're super excited about, but keep checking the field trip page because there always is something new going on. Another thing, since we did talk about that crisis homeschooling, check out the relief page. You can go right to nche.com, scroll down a little bit on the homepage, and there'll be a link to that page. So for anyone in crisis, anyone in Western North Carolina, that I know so many are still struggling, there's a lot of good information on there, some links, and just great things for hopefully to provide a little bit of help in this really hard time. And last but not least, we have talked a lot about Thrive in other episodes, but there's a few things out there. It's not time to register for Thrive yet, but if you have a favorite vendor, you have a favorite curriculum provider, you have a favorite college, you have a favorite trade, all of those things, all those companies, we would love to have them at Thrive. So please send them a message and say, hey, you should apply to be a part of Thrive. So in the show notes will be the link for all of those applications. You can send it to your favorites. So help us out with that. And as always, please like, subscribe, share with your friends. I know anybody from Humility and Doxology that follows that's now watching this, we would love to have you subscribe to the Homeschool Show. And let us know if you have any comments, questions, suggestions that you want to see on the show. Contact us at thehomeschoolshow@nche.com. And as always, keep homeschooling with confidence and joy.